On the next episode of Painting and Travel, we'll explore one of the world's most productive copper mines in Butte, Montana at the Museum of Mining. Roger finds an old utility truck on the property where he sets up his easel and starts painting on location.
Traveling across the United States in a motorhome is such a great adventure. It gives us an opportunity to stop and walk around any town we might want to explore. And this is Butte, Montana. It was one of the largest cities in the Rocky Mountains in the late 1800s, evolving from some simple mining camps into an important city center, attracting workers from different countries. It was also one of the most notorious copper boomtowns in the American West and was referred to as the richest hill on earth. We paid a visit to the World Museum of Mining, where Roger found a subject to paint. I'll take you inside one of the mines later on.
Today I'm going to paint this old truck. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge because we've got a lot of rain in the area, so hopefully I'll be able to finish before it starts to rain. I'm using an 11 by 14 inch piece of masonite covered with gesso. Now this particular truck is a 1920s Indiana truck, and it was used for drilling water wells, blast holes, and exploration holes for new mines. I believe it must be the only one like it in the world. It has all those great wheels and gears and everything. It's just a wonderful subject. I'm getting some rain on me right now. So I'll work quickly and I'll do what I can. We may have to quit here and go back into the studio. I'm going to paint this as a wash to begin with because I just don't have much time. Now I drew this out yesterday quite accurately in pencil. So that has given me a nice head start on painting this because it does take quite a while to draw something like this. The accuracy of a drawing of this subject is really quite important to the painting. Got my Indian yellow. I'll just put this in as a wash too. I don't think I'm going to get very far today because of this rain. So maybe I'll just approach this as a watercolor and get a few of my tones on here and a few of my colors. Then we may have to leave it at that and finish it in the studio. We'll see. That's one issue with painting out on location always, is that the weather changes frequently. Well, I haven't got very far. As you can see, it's starting to rain, so I think we're going to have to take this back into the studio and finish it from some photographs I took the other day. Well, the weather really got the best of us out on the field there, but I was lucky enough to take a few reference photos before the rain came in. So here we are back in the studio and we'll continue with this painting. As you can see, the rain right here just ran down here and sort of made a mess of that, but it's not too bad and that's easily fixed. So I guess I'll start by reworking the hood here of this old truck. And it's a very unusual greenish turquoise color. So I put some turquoise out on my palette, something I very seldom do unless I'm down in the Caribbean. So I'll mix that turquoise here with a touch of green and yellow. See if I can match that color that's on my reference photograph. And I'll put that right in here. There's an interesting shadow that comes across here. And right across the top, I have some light, some sunshine. What was left of the sunshine there, coming right across the top of that hood. We'll get that darker color that's in shadow. So I'll take that turquoise And I think I need a touch of warmth in there, so I'll get some burnt sienna. I think that might be pretty close. And right up in the top of this hood here. After I work on this painting for a little while, we'll go back and join Sarah at the museum here and find out a little more about this place. Okay, well, I want to soften those edges there. They're kind of hard edges, but I'm going to soften those just slightly. Now, what I have here right now is almost a very clean looking hood of this truck, and of course it's very old and beat up and rusty, so we'll put on these local colors first, this base coat, and then when this dries, and since these are acrylics, they'll dry very fast, then we'll go back and we'll kind of weather that, make it look old. All right, let's go down to the tire here. Now, I didn't put any black out on my palette. I don't think I need it. I could put Payne's gray or black out here, but I'm just going to mix some dark colors with my burnt umbers and blues and so on. It really isn't black here anyway. This is a very gray looking color. This tire was all frayed, just all beat up. That's what these white areas are in here. Those are just where the tread is totally come off. Very important to get a good drawing to begin with on a piece like this. If the drawing is off or the perspective is off, then no matter what amount of good painting is done on the piece, it's just not going to pull through. We've got a shadow out here, and this is very gray as well. Wasn't much grass going on here, but I will put a touch of green in there. Maybe just pick up this paint from the hood of the truck. And a slight touch of gray back in here. Right under here we have a shadow that goes all the way back under the truck. I don't have any real plan for what I should do next here. I generally paint with my dark areas first, but on a situation like this, it's not like painting a landscape where I've got large, massive areas to cover. These are all just small areas, so I can't really work with large areas like I could if I were doing a landscape with some mountains and trees and that sort of thing. Well, right under here, this is a very dark yellow. So I'll get some of that yellow here, and it's kind of warm. Yellow is a hard color to mix, especially if you want to get it dark. But I'll add some blue to that, and that tends to make it green. So I'll add a little bit of burnt sienna to that and warm it up. And we'll put in this framework under the truck. But I like all this weathering. The weathering really just adds so much to a painting like this. So to me, this is just as beautiful being rusty, maybe more so than if it were new. You got this splash pan right here. This is very rusty. This is almost like a paint by number thing. You just have to pick certain areas here and fill them in and kind of hope along the way you've got the right value and the right color. But that's not always the case. I often have to go back and adjust these values and adjust the colors, but it's very hard to do that until I get the entire painting covered. Lots of little things happening up here, little handrails and so on. Probably lose a lot of that detail as I try and paint this, but since I have a good reference photograph, that will be my lifesaver because I can just glance down here at my monitor and see what I need to put in next. I just noticed this tire here is in shadow more than the rest of the tire. So right here, I'll make this very dark. Keep that kind of a warm color. I'll take my spray bottle and mist that slightly. That way I can put a nice soft edge while this paint is still wet. Put a nice soft edge on that tire there. And while I got this dark color out, I'll just add a few more dark areas here. Again, I'll spray that. Just soften those edges. And I'll use that dark value there just to bring that right out to the side. So that tire just disappears into the ground, which it really did. It's good to lose some edges now and again. It's like right in here, we just lose that edge right from the undercarriage to the tire. You have some very dark passages right up here where this flywheel is. Well, I'll bet working with some of this stuff was pretty dangerous back in its day. Well, this part of the painting now is dry, even though it's only been a minute or two. So let's add some of that weathering to that. Now, I haven't worked on the fender yet because I want to put some more detail in here before I put that fender on, because we have some louvers and things like that in here. So I might as well put them in now, so that way I won't have to work around that fender. And this is a flat. I can just use it on its edge there and create quite a fine line. Now I'm going to take a pencil and indicate where these louvers go, because I don't want to get them in the wrong spot, and I don't want them to be different heights. So I'll just draw a line across the top and the bottom here so I know where they begin and end. All right, so I'll just put my ruler up here, just drag these lines straight down. Keep moving over to my left. I'll just keep going until I reach this end point right here where I think they stop. And while we're up there, there's a latch here, so I'll just indicate a few of these details. Another latch over here. It's easy to get caught up in a lot of maybe unnecessary details. I'm going to try not to do that, but this is such an interesting piece. I don't want to leave a whole lot out either. Got some kind of a nameplate right up here. Now these louvers face backwards, so the highlight part of these louvers goes right here towards the front. So we'll just give that a little curve, because these things are curve out and then they curve back in down here. Maybe just a touch or two more highlight right at the top. Well, since I'm working on the hood of the truck, I might as well finish this hood by putting some rusty looking patches in there. So I'm taking my yellow ochre, burnt sienna, maybe a touch of red, and I will spray this, just one fine spray, and then with a nice easy touch, I can just drag some of this rusty look down on the hood. There we go, I can spray that some more. Now if I sprayed that enough, it would actually start to drip down, and that might make an interesting rusty looking effect, but I don't think I want to get the rest of this too wet. Oh, I know what I can do though. I can take some of this dark color here, and I'll thin this quite thin, and I'm just going to splatter this area. It doesn't matter if I get it up here or anything, because I have to paint that anyway. So I'll just splatter some rusty looking spots on there. And what I'll do is I'll let those dry for a moment or two, then I'll take a brush and I'll wipe those off and soften them, because otherwise they'll just look like spots of paint. They'll look false. So if I wait a while, I'll just wipe those off, and then they'll become more part of the painting. So while that's drying, let's move over to the background here. This is a very neutral looking background. And this is a very neutral color here, just sort of a warm gray. And I think this warm gray will be very useful, because then by not having a lot of color in here, that will bring out the beauty of the color up here in the truck itself. I spray this board just to help this paint flow around a little easier. And I'll just load my brush up, and I don't really fuss with it too much. I load that brush up and I just lather it on there, get it on there. That's the most important thing, just to get it on. I can finesse it later if I want to, but getting it covered is very important to me, getting the whole piece covered. I'm going to take this brush, wipe it off so it's very dry, and then a very light touch, just drag those spots of paint down into the painting. It just sort of makes those disappear. Now, if I wait very long, those spots will dry and I won't be able to soften them. So it's a matter of timing. You have to wait just long enough, but not too long. Before I go any further, we'll join Sarah on site and see what the early days of mining were like.
Well, the early days of mining were extremely challenging, to say the least. It took the toughest kind of rugged individual you can imagine to work and live the life of a miner. We went to the World Museum of Mining, and I spoke to retired miner Tom Holter about the industry. What is this amazing structure that we're standing under?
Well, this would be a gallows frame.
A gallows frame.
Yeah. See, this is a wooden one, but after a while we had steel ones, like you see up there.
The gallows frame was essentially a massive pulley system, cables and wheels, designed to transfer enough force to lower and raise the men and materials in and out of the mine. I'm wondering, from what different countries did people come here to get the good jobs in mining?
Well, they come from all over. But we had people come from Italy, Norway, Germany, France, England, Spain, Ireland, all over. We had people from all over.
Well, that makes such a rich community.
Yeah, it did,
and
too,
driving
yeah.
downtown, we were fascinated with the different looks of the buildings.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The Chinese businesses led to the creation of a Chinatown, complete with a noodle parlor. And what are some of the minerals that have been mined here? And how many minerals?
Well, the first thing they found here, from what I understand, in fact, in the books that I got, the first thing they found here was gold. Then they found silver. And then they found copper. Since then, we mine zinc, manganese, molybdenum, lead, iron. There's 135 different kind of minerals underneath the city. Not all worth going after, but this is supposed to be one of the richest hills on earth.
Yesterday, when we took the tour, we saw a very interesting machine. And there's a cart, and then in front of it is something that looks like a scoop, and it comes down and it picks up the big rocks and throws it into the cart behind it.
That's the muck machine.
And the person running it has to look out because, you know, it just comes right by his face. And didn't it take quite a few decades to develop the safety features for the miners? Didn't they start off with a pretty unsafe environment?
Well, you know, when they start mining out here in the early 1900s, these were supposed to be the most dangerous mines in the United States.
Most dangerous mines in the United States?
At one time, that's right. Yeah.
Because they're so deep?
Well, probably because there was no safety rules.
What a risky career. I went inside one of the tunnels and thought about the lack of safety regulations and the limited medical help available in event of an accident. And how many miles of mines are there in this area, do you think?
Well, we call them tunnels. Like there's 10,000 miles of tunnels underneath the city.
The Mining Museum offers an interesting tour. We had a flashlight on our helmet, but the miners use candles and little acetylene lamps. Eventually your eyes adjust and you can see pretty well. Our guide showed us how the candle holder worked and how essential it was.
Timber. If you had a nail, you could hang it on a nail or a spike of rock that was sticking out. If you had a loose place in the rock, you could push it into the rock, and now you have the ability to work.
Copper was in high demand at the end of the 19th century due to new technologies like electric power.
Now, you'll be surprised how much you can see with the light of one candle. Go ahead and try it out.
The mines were open and working 24 hours a day, with closures only for repairs or an emergency. It's the mineral wealth in the hills that made this town and provided jobs for so many different occupations. When you visit Butte today, you can still see an amazing array of architectural styles and find unusual ethnic foods. It's a genuine living history city.
Well, I'll put the sky in now. It was a very gray sky, and I'll really treat that pretty much the same as I did down here. Just cut around the truck. Now I want this sky to be very flat, so I don't want many brush strokes to show up in this painting. So after I put this on here, and while it's still wet, then I'll go back and just soften those brush strokes so we don't see those brush strokes. Now I'll go back here and I'll just make these strokes go different ways just to smooth this so I don't see any different textures and brush marks in there. So this area of the sky will be totally flat. Now, it's important for me not to spend a lot of time just doing little tiny brush strokes here. You know, I could spend all day just doing this, but I try and approach it in more of an aggressive way, just get the job done. Well, I have a few areas here that I haven't touched yet. One is this, the wheel down here. We've got some very dark areas in here. We've also got the hub of the wheel. Let's put that in. We've got a sort of a dark portion of that hub right down in here where it's in shadow. Then we'll have a lighter portion up in here. I'll scrape my palette off so I can have some more usable palette space. And I'll paint between the spokes of this wheel. This just takes a few minutes. Just sort of have to be patient and go all the way around with it. It's important to have a good brush when doing something like this. If the brush were frayed very much, or if it were just an older brush, this might not be possible, or it would certainly be a lot more difficult. So it's always a good idea to have some good brushes on hand for passages like this. Okay, I have some more shadow right under this wheel, right in here. Just a lot going on in this painting. Right here is the rim of the wheel, and this falls into shadow. The whole thing falls into shadow right into this area. This is where that frayed tire is, just peeling off. We'll add just a touch of that. All right, so now it's time to put in this fender. Part of it's dark and part of it's light. The side of the fender, I can't really see the top of the fender. And with this flat brush, this bright, I'm just going to start right here, and I can still see my line a little bit. I'm just going to drag this right around, being careful to get that curve. Drag that right down, and it gets wider as I come down. So I'll just flare that out just by pressing my brush down a little harder. So now let's put on the underside of that fender. We'll take some blue and brown, mix that dark color again, and right under here I'll add another stroke indicating the bottom side of that fender. Well, while I've got these dark areas out, let's jump over here to the grill. Here again, this is just kind of a paint by number thing, just filling in these areas. Just to steady my hand, I just put my hand over this other part of my hand there, and that just steadies this so I can get a nice straight line. And right out in front, there is the crank. Well, there's not much detail up in here, but we have to put that in. This is the steering column. So this should just take a second or two. Now the steering wheel is long gone, but the spokes on the steering wheel, they still remained here. So we'll put in those spokes. Look a little strange, doesn't it? Looks like an old umbrella that's gotten blown away by the wind. You know, that does look so strange. Why don't I just put the steering wheel back on this truck? Do a little restoration work here. Okay, I'll just put an oval right in here. Well, now it's time to take care of some of this foreground in here. I'm going to spray my board. Once again, I'll take some thin paint and I'll just splatter some pebbles and things here on the ground, what looks like pebbles. I'll vary my color somewhat. Now, if I get some splattering in areas that I don't want them to be, I just have to go in there in just a moment and wipe them out with a dry brush. Now, I need to let those dry, but not totally dry. I have to let them sit for a little while. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, some weeds need to be placed in here. And I'll use my fan brush, and we'll just flip a few weeds up here and there. All right, I'll take my big brush, which is dry, and I'll just drag these horizontally, and that will indicate the shadow side of that pebble. So those drops I've splattered on there just become little pebbles, and by dragging these horizontally, I get that little shadow effect. I have to be careful I don't let it dry too long, or I can't soften up those little drops enough to drag them to one side or another. Well, this foreground is a little vague, a little bland, so the addition of a few rocks might help, some larger rocks and pebbles. So I'll just jab those in there. And there may be a few smaller ones towards the back. Pick up a darker value here, and I'll just put a shadow right on the side of these rocks. A few touches of highlights I think will finish this piece. And we'll add those right to these louvers here. And I do have another reference photograph where I could see this logo better, and it did say Indiana. So I'll just make these letters more distinguishable. And right across the top, it had a little indentation there. And I'll highlight that right on the edge and on this edge. Well, it's hard to know when to put the brushes down and call the painting quits, but I think those few highlights will have brought this painting to a conclusion. So now I'll sign it and we'll take one last look.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.